Hey everybody, Married Man here. Today I'm coming to you to talk about Lazy Susans. How easy it can be to get one, all the way to how difficult you can make it. The important thing to note is the easiest way to get a Lazy Susan is to go buy a Lazy Susan. But that's not why we're here. We're talking about do-it-yourself Lazy Susans. So the easiest way I know to make one is to get yourself some Lazy Susan hardware, similar to this 4-inch model I bought from Amazon, and get yourself a square piece of board similar to this. Doesn't have to have the design if you're trying to keep it simple. You just want a square or other shaped piece of board that you can attach to this hardware. And I'm trying to show you the video over here how I made this one. And of course I'll cut out the part where I made the stencil on here, but I'll include a link so you can go watch how that was done if you're interested in that. What you need to do is get your board, decide if you're going to put a baseboard on it, meaning are you going to have a board that attaches to the other side, or are you going to just let the base of the gadget here be your base. So your hardware here can attach to two different boards so that they pivot together, or it can attach to one and then you could set the other one on a surface and it will spin around. So in this case I used two different boards. I attached one to my baseboard. I had to drill a single hole off to one side so that I could then put my screwdriver through and attach the hardware with the baseboard already attached to the main piece of board, and you end up with a square Lazy Susan that when you put it on a surface will turn and hopefully look pretty for you. But that is one simple way you could make it. People like the square ones. I tend to like the round ones. So the easiest way to make a round Lazy Susan is to buy the round board already cut. Whenever you do that, you still need to find the center of the board so that you can locate your hardware. I'll show you how to do that too over here. It's basically, you'll need a large square and a 45-degree angle so that you can put the square up against the circle of your material, put the 45 degrees into the corner of the square and mark a line. Turn your board, do it again, and you'll find the exact center like I did here. And then you can attach your board. That would probably be your most complicated part of doing it this way. If you're going to do a baseboard on one that you buy the circle, the base doesn't have to be round. It can be. In this case, I made this Lazy Susan for my shop, and whenever I was experimenting with a jig to cut circles. So I just grabbed a square piece of MDF and made my base, and I ended up screwing or drilling two holes in here to attach the hardware to the main board. And now I have that in my shop and I can put items and it turns for me nice and smooth. So what if you don't want to buy the material already cut to a circle? Then you have to find a way to cut the circle yourself. You could try cutting a perfect circle by drawing it out and using a jigsaw or a coping saw or some other saw and cut the surface. Or you can build some kind of jig to cut your circles on the table saw, which there's plenty of examples of that on YouTube, or using a band saw, which I don't have a band saw, but you could make a jig to cut circles with it. The blade could move on you, causing imperfections in your circle. Or you could do like I did and create a circle jig for a router. In my case, I don't like taking my router out of the router table, so I made a jig for the router table. But there are jigs out there online that you can find where if you have a handheld router, you can make a jig for that. I have not done that, and the way that I've done my jig, I believe, is very stable, and it enables me to cut these circles and much more. You can see I cut 2 circles for this Lazy Susan. One, which was 13 pieces of wood, colored, stained, on every other board and glued up, and then I used the jig. You'll notice there's no hole in the center, and if you were to turn this board over, there's no hole in the center of the back. The same thing with the base board. The base was cut the same way, and then I used the router table with a round over bit and rounded over the edges so that this is nice and rounded. And then this serves as a nice centerpiece to a table, especially around 4th of July or other patriotic holidays. But you can use this same principle to cut hardwood or any board you want to cut into a circle. I'll show you that jig now. As we get ready to do this, I've already glued up a new board which I'm going to try to make a Lazy Susan out of, and there's a video out there showing how I did this. I'll attach it to a card here. I'll put the link in the description. Okay, hope you like what you're seeing. Hope you'll give me a like, a thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more. Let's take a look at that jig. So this is our base to our circle cutting jig. It has 2 slots in it. When trying to figure out how to make a circle cutting jig, the challenge always is how to keep the center of the board being cut at an exact distance from the straight bit that is doing the cutting. And I primarily was looking for something to make Lazy Susans. So I thought, why fight what is already happening? Whenever you attach the board for the Lazy Susan to the Lazy Susan hardware, it already has a center point. So whenever I attach this to the board, I can then already have in a couple of bolts on the part that would normally attach to the other board or the base board. Now I can just take those, slide them into those slots. Below, I will secure them with washers and wing nuts. Once I secure them, I can loosen them and I can adjust the diameter of my board by sliding this and then tightening it down where I want it. Then, as I do my cut with my straight bit on, I just have to raise the router in the router table a little bit at a time. Make my circle, raise it again, make my circle, raise the bit again. It'd be best to show you. Remember this board that we wanted to make a Lazy Susan out of? Let's do that. With a straight edge, I go corner to corner and make a mark. I go from the other corners and make a mark. I take my hardware, I put in 2 bolts on the side that is not facing the board. I line up the other side, making sure the corners line up and cross those lines that I just drew. When you do have these corners lined up the best that you can, I like to take a punch and punch a little tiny hole in the center of each opening where I'm going to put screws into the board. These will be the same screw holes that end up in the final product. With the screws in there and the bolts already in there, we're ready to turn this over and lower it into position. With the top attached to the hardware and the hardware with the bolts in it going through the jig, we need to determine where we're going to start our cut. I want to be able to ride it over here to where the bit is, make sure the bit is going to cut into the edge. We can now tighten down the wing nuts down below it. With the wing nuts securing it, we're now ready for our first turn. We will continue to raise the bit a little bit at a time. I'm using a small straight bit, and I'll just be incrementally raising it up until we can cut the circle through. I find that with it still attached like this, it's a good time to sand the sides if you're going to. If you're going to treat those using a different kind of router bit or something, now might be the time for that. I'm going to go ahead and hit it with the sander real quick. With the wing nuts loose, I can lift it off of here. It's completely centered. We know where the screw holes go to secure it, and that'll help us in the next steps. Let's get these unscrewed. Now that we have our circle cut, we can do whatever we want to with the edges. I could burn them like I did with the other Lazy Susan. We could stain them, we could paint them, we could put a different router bit on and give them a different treatment. The versatility is really there, but now it's time we need a board to serve as our base. And this time I want a round board. Now the limitation of the way the jig is that I showed you so far is that it can cut round circles from about 18 inches to about 50 inches. What do we do when it's less than 18 inches? We have an accessory to our jig just for that purpose. Our accessory is as simple as a single board with 4 holes drilled in for bolts to fit through. Those are spaced so that they will slide right into the slots on our primary jig. Once they're in there, it allows us the movement back and forth so we can make adjustments. For our next part, I found a board that I'm going to use as my base. I've already measured off an area that would make it square, and then drew the lines across from what would be the corners to find the center, and I attached the hardware. Since this is going to be our base, I'm also going to identify where to drill an access hole, and that way I'll attach this part of the hardware directly to this accessory to the jig at a diameter that's close to what we want in our end result. If I'm a little bit off on where I put it, I can just slide my jig over and get it right and be able to turn the board as it cuts. If I were cutting the top piece to our Lazy Susan, then I wouldn't want to cut an access hole in this. Instead, I would cut the access hole. I would identify where I want it, then cut an access hole into my jig accessory here, and I'd be able to screw in from below after attaching the hardware. Next step, let's find where to drill that access hole, and let's go ahead and get it drilled. To find where to drill the access hole, I take the hardware and turn it diagonally with it attached. Then I just select one side. I'm going to select this side over here and make a mark, and I'm doing this with a punch, so now I know exactly where to drill. With the jig accessory secured with wing nuts underneath, I'm now ready to attach my bottom board. I'm going to line it up here where the bit will end up hitting it. Then I'll be able to turn until I see where a screw needs to go. I'm going to use my punch a starter hole, grab a screw and a screwdriver, now I can turn it all the way around, find the opposite hole for a screw, use my punch again, put it in the center, make a starting hole. Get my screw and screwdriver. Now it's time that I raise that bit up some and turn it on and start making this cut. With the circle cut, I can take these screws out and we can take the next step. Here's a free tip. Whenever you're drilling the access hole, put a backer board so you don't have blowout like this. It'll save you some heartache, but for this example, I'm going to move forward with it. Now we just need to attach our lower piece, already attached to the baseboard, through the access hole to the main piece using the same holes that the screws used the first time. We already had 4 screw holes in here whenever we had the hardware on there previously. With the screws back in, I can turn this over. No holes in the top piece at all. There's only one hole in the bottom piece, and that's an access hole, so you can attach the hardware to the upper piece. You can finish this however you would like. If you just want to put some protectant on it, or if you want to paint it. Whenever you're done with that, I suggest you use some of these felt bumpers or rubber bumpers. I'll get you a close-up. I just picked these up at Lowe's. And on round ones, I find that it's best to put 3. I would put like one here, one here, one here. That way, no matter what surface you're putting it on, you'd be able to find a balance. If you put 4, sometimes if you put it on a table that's not level, it won't balance correctly. And Lazy Susans. I hope you liked it. Give me that thumbs up, subscribe, share it with all your friends on Facebook, Twitter, and any other social media. I'll see you next. Oh, I hear my wife calling. I gotta go.